My family mocked me as I collapsed, gasping for air. "Quit faking it," my father snapped. They thought I was just a jobless failure seeking attention. But when the EMTs shouted for a stretcher, their laughter turned to chaos. So I used my financial skills to dismantle their lives. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The air in my father's living room was thick with the smell of stale coffee and self-satisfaction. It was Sunday, which meant I was obligated to be there, to endure the weekly ritual of my family picking apart my life. I was 39 years old, a senior financial analyst, or at least, I had been until 3 weeks ago. My entire department had been dissolved in a corporate restructuring, and just like that, 15 years of my career evaporated. I was trying to explain this, yet again, when the first wave hit. It wasn't a gradual thing. It was a sudden, violent thud in my chest, as if a bird had slammed against a window. My heart didn't just speed up, it felt like it was trying to escape my ribcage. A cold, tingling sensation spread up my neck and into my jaw, and the edges of my vision blurred. I reached out, my hand finding the rough texture of the plaster wall. "Claire, stop slouching," my father, Robert, barked from his armchair. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. I just need a minute," I managed to whisper. The words felt heavy, my tongue thick. I was gripping the wall, my knuckles white, trying to will the world to stop tilting. My breath was coming in short, useless gasps. "Oh, for heaven's sake," my Aunt Brenda scoffed. She was perched on the sofa, a vulture in a floral dress. "Quit faking it," my dad snapped, his voice sharp as glass. He finally lowered the paper, his eyes cold and assessing. "We all get it, you're upset, but this is pathetic." "He's right, Claire," Brenda chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "We know your little job fell through, but this is just attention-seeking. It's embarrassing." My brother, Leo, the family's golden boy, just sighed from the kitchen doorway, holding a beer. "Here we go again," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Here we go again?" The phrase echoed in my head. They thought this was a performance. They thought my body collapsing was a negotiating tactic. I tried to respond, to tell them this was different, that this was terrifying. But my chest tightened until it felt like it was wrapped in steel bands. My legs, suddenly boneless, gave out. I slid down the wall, landing in a crumpled heap on the abrasive carpet. The room was silent for a beat. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that had marked every second of my childhood miseries. "Get up, Claire," Robert ordered, his voice flat. "You're making a scene." I couldn't. I was staring at a dust bunny under the side table, my heart hammering against my ribs at a speed that felt impossible. I was going to die. Here, on my father's beige carpet, while being mocked by the people who were supposed to love me. The doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent sound. "Who invited someone else to this pity party?" Brenda griped. "Leo went to get it?" I heard murmuring at the door and then footsteps. Not Leo's casual tread, but heavy, purposeful steps. 2 men in dark blue uniforms appeared in the doorway. EMTs. My vision was tunneling, but I could see the patch on their sleeves. My brother, bless his useless heart, must have called 911 when I first complained of the chest pain, probably just to cover himself. He'd done it before, and when it turned out to be just a panic attack, I'd been subjected to weeks of ridicule. The room, which had been so quick to mock, was now frozen. My father was halfway out of his chair, his newspaper crumpled in his fist. One of the EMTs, a man with a calm face and tired eyes, knelt beside me. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He didn't ask me if I was faking. He put 2 fingers to my neck, his eyes on his watch. His expression changed instantly. "What's her pulse?" his partner asked, pulling out a small monitor. "I can't count it, it's too fast. Like a hummingbird," the first EMT said. He looked up, not at me, but at my family. His gaze was hard. "How long has she been like this?" "She's just stressed," Robert began. "She lost her." "I don't care what she lost." The EMT cut him off, his voice a command. He looked at his partner. "We need a stretcher now." The second EMT was already on his radio, rattling off codes I didn't understand. The first one was back at my side, his voice gentle. "Ma'am, we're going to take care of you. What's your name?" "Claire," I gasped. "Okay, Claire, you're an SVT. Your heart's in a bad rhythm. We're going to fix it." And just like that, the room went from mocking to chaos. My father was shouting, "SVT? What's that? Is that serious?" Brenda was suddenly wringing her hands, her face pale. "Oh dear," she whispered. "Oh dear." Leo looked like he was going to be sick. The EMTs were a blur of efficient motion. They had a mask on my face, an IV in my arm. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, the world spinning around me, I locked eyes with my father. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a gray, pasty fear. But I felt no satisfaction. I felt no vindication. As they wheeled me out the door, the last thing I heard was Brenda's thin wail, "But who will make dinner?" I closed my eyes. The betrayal, I realized, was so much worse than the diagnosis. The ambulance ride was a jolt of harsh reality. The wail of the siren seemed to pulse in time with the frantic, irregular rhythm in my chest. The EMTs worked on me with a calm urgency, their voices a low murmur of medical terms. One of them, the one who had first checked my pulse, held my hand. "We're going to try something to reset your heart, Claire," he said, his voice steady. "It's going to feel very strange. I need you to bear down like you're trying to have a bowel movement. Hold your breath." I tried. I bore down, my face flushing, the world going black at the edges. Nothing. The frantic tapping in my chest continued, a runaway train. "Okay, no good," he said, not unkindly. "Hospital's 2 minutes out. They'll have the good stuff." The good stuff was a drug called adenosine. They pushed it into my IV in the emergency bay, and it felt exactly as they warned it would, like dying. For 6 long seconds, my heart stopped completely. It was a terrifying, suffocating void, a complete cessation of everything. And then, with a jolt so hard it lifted me off the gurney, it restarted. Thump, 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 thump. A slow, steady, beautiful beat. "Welcome back," the nurse smiled. I spent the next 2 days in the cardiac observation unit. My diagnosis, supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT, brought on by extreme stress and most likely an underlying electrical pathway issue in my heart. The layoff wasn't just an emotional blow, it was a physical one. My body, which had been running on high alert for 15 years in a high-stakes finance job, had finally short-circuited when the music stopped. My family, predictably, was a mess, but not in the way a supportive family would be. They were a mess of inconvenience and indignation. My father, Robert, was the first to call. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask what the doctors said. "Claire," he barked into the phone, his voice grating through the receiver. "You've caused a lot of trouble. Brenda is hysterical. You know she can't handle this kind of excitement. The neighbors were all watching when the ambulance left. It was a circus." I was lying in a hospital bed, hooked up to a monitor that beeped reassuringly beside me. My chest ached, not from my heart, but from a profound, cavernous sadness. "I'm sorry you were embarrassed, Dad," I said, my voice flat. "Embarrassed? I'm not embarrassed," he huffed, the lie hanging in the air. "I'm just saying you need to get a grip on yourself. This drama, it's not becoming. Your aunt is already convinced you're having a full nervous breakdown." "The doctor said my heart rate was over 220, I told him, needing, for some reason, to prove my own reality. They had to stop my heart to restart it. There was a long pause. I heard him take a drink of something, probably his afternoon scotch. "Well," he said finally, "they're always trying to sell you something at hospitals. Just don't sign anything and tell them you're fine. I need you to look at my portfolio. The market's all over the place." He hung up before I could reply. My brother Leo sent a text. "Hey, you okay? That was crazy. Dad is on a rampage. Call me when you get out." Not "I'm so glad you're alive." Not "I'm so sorry I thought you were faking." Just a report from the field, as if he were a neutral observer and not the man who had muttered, "Here we go again," as I collapsed. Brenda didn't call or text. She sent a get-well-soon card to the house, which my neighbor brought over later. It had a cartoon cat on it. Inside, she had written, "Hope you're feeling more yourself soon. Let's not have a repeat of Sunday, shall we? It was all very taxing." I lay in the sterile white room, listening to the steady beat of my own, repaired heart, and I felt a cold, clear sanity settle over me. For my entire life, I had been the family's pillar. I was the responsible one, the smart one, the one who fixed things. I managed my father's retirement accounts. I had co-signed on Leo's mortgage for his starter home, which was nicer than mine. I paid for Brenda's emergency dental work that turned out to be veneers. I was the unpaid financial analyst, the on-call therapist, and the eternal scapegoat. And when I, the pillar, finally cracked, they hadn't rushed to suppose. Me, they had stepped back, pointed, and laughed at the rubble. A cardiologist, a kind woman with gentle eyes named Dr. Eris, came in to discuss my discharge. "Your heart is stable, Claire," she said, "but this is a serious warning. The SVT is manageable, but the trigger is the problem. Your stress levels are, quite literally, killing you. You need to eliminate the sources of your stress. Drastically." I looked at the buzzing phone on my side table, where another text from my father had just lit up the screen. "Brenda needs a new water heater. Go online and find one for her when you're done resting." I smiled, a thin, cold smile that felt new on my face. Dr. Eris was right. I needed to eliminate the source of my stress. They all thought I was just Claire, the failed analyst. The dramatic, unemployed daughter. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I did. And above all, they had forgotten one crucial thing: I was the one who held all the keys. To understand what I did next, you have to understand what I'd done before. I wasn't just the good daughter, I was the competent one. My competence was my cage, and I had been the one to build it, bar by bar. It started when my mother died 15 years ago. I was just 24, fresh out of my master's program, and I'd just landed my first job at the firm. My father, Robert, who had always been emotionally distant, became financially helpless. My mother had handled everything, and her passing left a vacuum that he expected me to fill. "Claire, you're good with numbers," he'd said, pushing a shoebox full of utility bills and bank statements at me. "Just sort this." So I did. I sorted it. I consolidated his accounts. I set up his bill payments. I took his jumbled, chaotic collection of stocks and bonds and, over the next decade, turned it into a robust, multi-million-dollar retirement portfolio. I did it on nights and weekends for free because that's what a good daughter did. My Aunt Brenda, my mother's replacement as the family matriarch, a role she seized with relish, was a different kind of parasite. She was a woman who had lived her entire life on the fumes of other people's generosity. She'd never held a job for more than a few months, claiming a rotating series of sensitivities and ailments. She lived in a charming little bungalow in a nice neighborhood. What she never told anyone was that the bungalow was owned by Robert. It was one of his investment properties, one that I had sourced and secured for him. Brenda lived there rent-free, a temporary arrangement that had lasted 12 years. Then there was Leo, my little brother, the golden boy. While I was in the library, he was on the football field. While I was studying for my Series 7, I was never quite sure what Leo did. He was charismatic, handsome, and utterly allergic to responsibility. His career was a series of vague consulting gigs that never seemed to pan out. When he wanted to buy a condo 5 years ago, his credit was, to put it mildly, a disaster. So I co-signed. I didn't just co-sign. I structured the deal, got him the prime rate, and set up an automatic transfer from my own account to cover the portion of the mortgage he forgot every few months. My family, in essence, was a poorly run business, and I was its unpaid CEO. My layoff had just been the first crack in the foundation. My health crisis was the earthquake. In the hospital, that cold, clear sanity I'd felt began to sharpen. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. My father and my aunt, in particular, were not just clueless. They were actively malicious. I remembered a dinner just a month before my layoff. Robert was holding court, bragging about his portfolio's performance. "Claire's smart, I'll give her that," he'd said, gesturing at me with a steak knife. "She gets it from me, but she's too cautious, too buttoned up, no killer instinct." Brenda had nodded, sipping her wine. "And she never has any fun. All you do is work, dear. You're going to end up a rich, lonely old maid." "At least she's rich," Leo had laughed, and they all clinked glasses. They saw me as a tool, a high-functioning, low-maintenance appliance. The problem, I realized, was that they truly believed their own narrative. They believed Robert was a self-made financial genius. They believed Brenda was a delicate, wronged woman. They believed Leo was just on the cusp of his big break. And they believed I was just a stressed-out, unemployed woman having a breakdown. The true antagonist, I realized, wasn't just my father's coldness or my aunt's pettiness. It was their profound, arrogant, and willful ignorance of my value. They had spent decades minimizing my contributions so they could maximize their comfort. Brenda's polished but disingenuous facade was the most transparent. She always looked impeccable, her hair perfectly coiffed, her jewelry expensive, I knew, because I'd seen the credit card bills I paid for my F. She spoke of her community work and charity lunches, but I knew she spent her days shopping and watching daytime television. Her vague profession was consultant, but when I'd once pressed her on what exactly she consulted on, she'd waved a hand and said, "Oh, you know, dear, lifestyles, taste." Her interest in my assets was anything but subtle. "Claire," she'd said at that same dinner, "when you finally get that big promotion," I was already a senior VP, but to her, I was still an intern, "you should really think about buying a beach house, something we could all use." They were a closed loop of entitlement, and I was the power source. Lying in that hospital bed, I thought about the first EMT. "We need a stretcher, now," the authority in his voice, the immediate, non-negotiable validation of my reality. My family had failed that test. They had seen me dying, and they had chosen to see an inconvenience. So I would become one. The killer instinct my father thought I lacked, he was about to see it. He and Brenda had forgotten the single most important detail of the financial empire I managed. Years ago, to simplify his estate and avoid probate, I had convinced Robert to put all his assets, the portfolio, the checking accounts, the house Brenda lived in, into a revocable living trust. It was a standard, smart financial move. And because I was the only one he trusted to be good with the numbers, he had made me the sole executor and trustee. He had given me the keys to the kingdom. And as I lay there, my heart beating strong and steady, I decided, for the first time, to use them. The shift from victim to strategist began on my third and final day in the hospital. The clarity I'd felt was no longer a cold comfort. It was a white-hot, singular focus. Dr. Aris had ordered me to eliminate stress. My family was stress. The solution was simple, a financial equation. I needed to divest. My hands were steady as I dialed the number. It wasn't my father or my brother. It was David. David Chen was my lawyer. He was also, over the last 15 years, the closest thing I had to a friend. We'd met in the trenches of corporate finance, and he'd left to start his own estate planning firm. He was meticulous, brilliant, and had the predatory instincts of a shark, which he reserved exclusively for protecting his clients. "Claire," he answered, his voice instantly sharp with concern, "I saw your text. Cardiac unit, are you all right?" "I am now," I said, and my voice was so calm it surprised me. "David, I need to retain you. Not for the firm, for me, personally." "Done, what's the situation?" "I'm the trustee for my father's living trust." "Robert's trust? Yes, I remember. I helped you draft the update in 19. You have full control as trustee. Why?" "My father, my aunt, and my brother," I said, "collectively decided that a near-fatal cardiac event was me faking it for attention after my layoff." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. David, in all the years I'd known him, was not a man given to emotional outbursts. When he finally spoke, His voice was lethally quiet. I see. And what precisely would you like to do about that, Claire? I want out, I said, the words tasting like freedom. I want to resign as trustee, but I don't want to just walk away. They are dependent. They don't know the first thing about managing their own lives. If I just drop it, they'll be destitute in 6 months, and somehow it will still be my fault. You're too nice, David said. No, I corrected him. I'm not. I don't want them to be destitute. I want them to be managed, professionally. I want them to pay, for the first time in their lives, for the services they've been getting for free. David let out a low whistle. A corporate trustee. You want me to initiate a transfer of trusteeship to a bank or a private fiduciary firm? Exactly, I said, the plan forming as I spoke. I want the most buttoned up, by the book, and expensive firm you can find. I want a firm that bills in 6-minute increments. I want a firm that will require a formal, written request to pay a utility bill. I want my family to have to justify, in triplicate, every single penny they've taken for granted. This is, David paused, and I could hear the smile in his voice. This is inspired, Claire. It's also a fortress. Citing your health, your doctor's explicit orders to reduce stress, and their hostile behavior as a direct risk to your fiduciary duty, no judge would ever question it. It's clean. That's the trap, I said, finally understanding my own internal monologue. That was the crucial thing they had forgotten. They thought I was their daughter, their sister, their niece. They forgot I was their trustee, a legal, binding fiduciary role, a role I could and would resign. Okay, David said, all business. Here's what we do. First, you do nothing. You go home, you rest, you block their numbers. You are recovering. I'll start the paperwork. I will identify 3 suitable fiduciary firms. We'll present them with the trust's assets, and they will compete for the business. Their management fees will be significant, and they will come directly out of the trust's principal. What about Brenda's house? I asked. The bungalow? It's an asset of the trust. The new trustee will have a fiduciary duty to make that asset perform. That means either selling it or, more likely, charging Brenda fair market rent. Immediately. A small, sharp laugh escaped me. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. And Leo. Your co-signature on his mortgage? That's a personal liability, Claire. It's separate from the trust. We can't undo that one as cleanly. It's fine, I said, already thinking. I've been covering half his payments for years. I have the bank statements to prove it. I'll just stop. When the bank comes calling, he'll have to figure it out, or he'll have to ask Dad for money. Who, David added, will have to file a formal written request with his new trustee to get it. The beauty of it was overwhelming. It wasn't just revenge, it was a perfect, logical financial restructuring. It was taking a chaotic, emotionally bankrupt system and imposing order, accountability, and consequences. One more thing, David, I said. I'm almost afraid to ask. For the last 15 years, I've provided financial planning and trust management services to Robert. I've never billed him. I'd like you to draw up an itemized invoice for my time, at my standard consulting rate, 15 years of it. Claire, David said, and this time he was genuinely laughing. You are my favorite client. You go home and get better. I will handle the new water heater. I disconnected the call and lay back against the pillows. The beeping of the heart monitor was steady and strong. For the first time, my own heart felt the same way. I was discharged an hour later, my father's and aunt's calls going straight to voicemail. I went home, not to my empty apartment, but to a nice hotel near David's office. The investigation was simple because I was investigating myself. I spent the next 2 days in that quiet hotel room, not resting, but working. I gathered every email, every bank statement, every late-night text. Claire, Leo's car payment is due. Can you handle it? Claire, Brenda's roof is leaking. Find a roofer. The good one, not the cheap one. Claire, my dividend check is missing. Find it. I compiled spreadsheets. I cross-referenced dates. I created a file so thick, so detailed, that it was less an invoice and more of an indictment. I documented the hours, the emotional labor, the career opportunities I'd passed up to stay close to them. When I was done, the file was 112 pages long. The final invoice, at a very conservative rate, came to a number that would, in no uncertain terms, rock the very foundation of my father's world. I emailed the secure file to David with a simple subject line: assets. The trap wasn't just set, it was audited. I gave it a week of blissful, uninterrupted silence. I spent it in that quiet hotel, sleeping more than I had in a decade. I took walks, I read books, I ate food that I hadn't cooked myself. My heart, no longer in a state of perpetual panic, beat with a slow, steady rhythm. I ignored the barrage of texts and voicemails which escalated from confused Leo. "Hey, where are you?" to annoyed Robert. "Claire, this isn't funny, call me." To borderline hysterical Brenda. "Claire, my water is still cold. Robert said you were handling it. What am I supposed to do?" David and I had one brief meeting. He had, as promised, found the perfect corporate trustee, Lockwood Fiduciary Services. They were known for being ironclad, impersonal, and breathtakingly expensive. "They're a joy to work with," David said, sliding their glossy brochure across the table. "They manage estates for tech billionaires and feuding aristocrats. They've seen it all, and they are impressed by none of it. They find your family's particular brand of dysfunction untenable and are eager to implement stabilization protocols." "They sound perfect," I said. "They are. The paperwork is ready. All you have to do is sign. Once you do, I will file it, and a certified letter will be dispatched to your father, your aunt, and your brother, informing them of the immediate change in trusteeship." "Not yet," I said. "They deserve one last chance." David raised an eyebrow. "Claire, they don't deserve." "I know," I said. "This isn't for them. It's for me. I need to see their faces when I'm not the one on the floor. I need to deliver the first no of my adult life." The confrontation happened on my terms, at my place. After checking out of the hotel, I returned to my apartment. I had been home for less than an hour when the inevitable occurred. My doorman, a lovely man named Carlos, buzzed up. "Ms. Cly." "Ray, your family is here. They seem agitated." "Send them up, Carlos," I said, "and thank you." I waited by the door, not in fear, but with a strange, detached curiosity. I heard them before I saw them: the angry stomp of my father's shoes on the hallway carpet, Brenda's high, reedy complaints. I opened the door just as my father's hand was raised to hammer on it. He stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe. Robert, Brenda, and Leo stood there, a united front of indignation. "Claire," my father bellowed, pushing past me into my apartment. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." Worried sick was their code for inconvenienced. "I've been recovering," I said calmly, closing the door, "like my doctor ordered." "Oh, this doctor nonsense," Brenda scoffed, marching in after him. She inspected my living room, her nose wrinkled in distaste. "You've been ignoring us, Claire. My water heater is still broken. I've had to heat water on the stove to bathe, like some kind of pioneer." "And my calls," Robert said, spinning to face me. He was red in the face, a vein pulsing in his temple. "You don't answer my calls? After everything, I need you to look at my accounts. Something's wrong. The dividend payments are late." Leo, as always, hung back, his hands in his pockets. "It's not cool, Claire. We all thought you were like in a ditch or something." I walked over to my sofa and sat down. I didn't offer them a seat. I just looked at them, this tribunal of my accusers. "First," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the silent room, "I'm glad you're all here. It saves me the trouble of making separate calls." "Calls, what are you?" Robert started. "My doctor nonsense, as you call it, Brenda, was a severe cardiac event. The drama you all found so taxing was my heart failing." "Now, Claire," Robert interrupted, holding up a hand, "let's not be dramatic. You're fine, you're always fine, you're tough, you just needed a rest. Now about my portfolio." "The portfolio is fine, Dad," I said. "The dividends aren't late. They are being held." This, finally, shut him up. "What do you mean, held? he asked, his voice losing its bluster. I mean held, I said. As the trustee of your living trust, I have a fiduciary duty to protect its assets. Given my recent, severe health scare, a scare that was, I've been told by medical professionals, directly linked to the stress of managing this family, I have had to reevaluate my position. Brenda looked confused. Fiduciary, what is she talking about, Robert? Robert's face had gone from red to a sickly, pale gray. He knew what trustee meant. He just thought it was a title, a formality. He never realized it was a job. Claire, he said, his voice a low threat. You are my daughter. You will do what you are told. No, I said. The word was small, but it landed like a grenade. No, I won't. I am your daughter, yes, but I am also your trustee. And my lawyer, the word lawyer made them all flinch, has advised me that your behavior, your demands, and your complete lack of support constitute a hostile environment which is putting the trust's assets at risk. By assets, I mean my health. Your lawyer, Leo piped up, his voice squeaking. You got a lawyer. I am a financial analyst, Leo, I said, turning to him. Of course I have a lawyer. I let the silence stretch. I let them process the first, tiny piece of this new reality. They had come here to scold a disobedient child. They had found, instead, a hostile corporate executive. So what are you saying? Brenda said, her voice trembling. You're not going to help us. Oh, I'm going to help you, Aunt Brenda, I said, standing up. I'm going to help you all. I'm going to set you up with a team of professionals who will manage your lives with the kind of dispassionate, billable efficiency you so clearly deserve. You can't do this, Robert roared. It's my money, it's my house. It is, I agreed, smiling that new, cold smile. It's all yours. And as of this moment, you are going to be the one responsible for it. I am resigning as trustee. My lawyer, David, will be in touch to coordinate the transition. I'd suggest you find your own lawyer, Dad. You're going to need one. Robert's reaction was textbook. He lashed out with the only weapon he had, insults. You're a failure, Claire. A bitter, unemployed, lonely woman. You think you're so smart. You got fired. You have nothing. You're just doing this to hurt us because you're miserable. I just looked at him. I let his words, which once would have shattered me, fall to the floor. You're right about one thing, Dad, I said. I am unemployed, which means I finally have the time to do this right. I walked to my desk, picked up the thick 112-page file I had prepared, and held it out. What's this? He spat. It's my resignation letter, I said, and my final invoice. My father stared at the bound document, as if I'd handed him a live snake. An invoice? What in the world? This is madness. You don't invoice your own father. I do, I said, my voice as flat and final as an audited report, when he's a client. And you, Dad, have been my most demanding client for 15 years. He snatched the document. Brenda and Leo crowded behind him, peering over his shoulder. I watched as their eyes scanned the cover page. Claire Marie Thompson, Fiduciary Services rendered. Period, 2020-2025. Final invoice. Robert's hands were shaking as he flipped to the last page. I knew the number he was seeing. It was a number I had carefully and conservatively calculated, $450,000. It was based on a blended rate for financial management, property management, and on-call crisis consulting. It was, in all honesty, a bargain. Robert's face, which had been pale, turned a deep, alarming shade of crimson. 400. This is extortion. This is illegal. Is it? I asked, turning my gaze to my brother. Leo, do you remember in 2018 when your business partner vanished along with $50,000 of your money you'd borrowed from Dad, who spent the next 2 weeks on the phone with forensic accountants and lawyers, clawing back 90% of it, all while you were too stressed to get out of bed? That's on page 34. Billed at my standard crisis management rate. Leo blanched. He looked like he'd been slapped. And Brenda, I continued, my voice calm, do you remember the charming bungalow Dad bought in 2013? The one I found, negotiated, and structured the financing for? The one you've been living in, rent-free, ever since. The property management fee is on page 52. By the way, the market rent for that area is now about $4,000 a month. I'm sure your new trustees will be fascinated to learn about that underperforming asset. Brenda, for the first time in her life, was speechless. She was clutching her pearls, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "This is insane," Robert finally bellowed, throwing the invoice onto my coffee table. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud. "You can't do this. I'll have you disbarred, or whatever it is you do." "You'll what, Dad?" I asked. "You'll fire me. I just quit. You'll sue me. For what? For doing the job you assign me? For 15 years, for free? Please," I gestured to the phone. "Call your lawyer." "Oh, wait. I am your lawyer's contact. I'm the one who's had a standing weekly call with your estate attorney for the last decade. He'll be just as surprised as you are to hear from you." They were desperate, and their desperation made them clumsy. You're sick," Brenda stammered, falling back on the old narrative. "You're not well. This is the breakdown. Robert, she's having her nervous breakdown." "I have never," I said, walking toward her, "felt less broken in my entire life. My head is clear. My heart is steady. And my hand is, for the first time, not being forced. This is not a breakdown, Aunt Brenda. This is a reallocation of assets." My father saw his opening. "Exactly, you're sick. You're not competent to make these decisions," he said, lunging for the new narrative. "I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll take control. You can't resign if you're mentally unfit." I almost laughed. It was such a pathetic, poorly executed threat. "That's a fascinating strategy, Dad," I said. "So, let me get this straight. Your daughter, the financial analyst you trusted to build and manage your entire multi-million-dollar estate, the same one you've been bragging about for years, is suddenly incompetent. The moment she stops working for free, what do you think a judge will say to that? What do you think your new, very expensive fiduciary firm will say?" I let that sink in. I watched him mentally play out the scenario, the humiliation, the sheer, crushing cost of the legal battle he was proposing. I watched the fight drain out of him, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar terror. He was, for the first time, not in control. "And as for this invoice," I said, picking it up, "this isn't a threat. It's a legal document. It's a claim against the trust's assets, a debt owed for services rendered. My lawyer, David, has already filed it. It will be the very first bill that Lockwood Fiduciary Services pays upon transfer of trusteeship." This was the final, irrefutable proof. This wasn't a family argument. This was a hostile takeover, executed perfectly, legally, and with extreme prejudice. My father, a man I had never seen cry, looked small, his shoulders slumped. He sank into my armchair, his head in his hands. "Why," he whispered, it was a genuine question. "Why, Claire, were your family?" "You were," I said, and the sadness I'd been holding back ached in my chest. "You were, but on Sunday when I was on the floor and I was dying, you weren't my family, you were my critics, you were my audience. You told me to quit faking it. You said I was." "Embarrassing," Leo said, "here we go again. And Brenda worried about dinner." I looked at Leo. He was the only one who wouldn't meet my eyes. He was staring at his shoes, his face white. He was still struggling, I could see it. He was caught between the man who paid his bills and the sister who had just cut the line. "So I'm taking the EMT's advice," I said. He shouted, "We need a stretcher now." He saw the problem and he acted. My family saw the problem and they scoffed. My doctor told me to eliminate my stress. "You," I said, looking at each of them in turn, "are my stress. This isn't a punishment, it's a prescription." "So what happens now?" Leo asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What happens to us?" "Now," I said, "you will receive a certified letter from Lockwood Fiduciary Services. You will be assigned a case manager. His name is Mr. Henderson. He's very professional. He will require you to submit in writing any and all requests for funds. He will review your budgets. He will, I'm sure, be in touch with you, Brenda, about the rent situation. And he will, Dad, manage your portfolio. For a very handsome fee, of course. A fee that you will pay, not me." Robert said nothing. Brenda was, for once, silent, her mind clearly and rapidly calculating the cost of $4,000 a month in rent. The spell was broken. The image they had of me as the unemployed, dramatic daughter was shattered, replaced by the terrifying, cold-eyed professional who was currently, and legally, dismantling their lives. The certified letters arrived the next day. The chaos was, I was told by David, immediate and deeply satisfying. Lockwood Fiduciary Services, true to their word, were stabilizing the situation. My father's accounts were frozen pending a full audit. Brenda received a formal letter containing the phrases fair market value and 30-day notice to establish a payment plan or vacate. Leo's phone calls to me, which I'd unblocked out of curiosity, went from wheedling, "Claire, come on, this is crazy, just call it off," to panicked, "Claire, my car payment. Dad won't answer." They demanded a meeting, not a polite request, but a summons. Robert called me, his voice a low, trembling rage, and said, "We are all coming to your apartment. Sunday, 5 o'clock, you will be there, and you will fix this." It was the perfect stage. A family dinner that was, in reality, a desperate, last-ditch attempt to bully me back into submission. I was there at 5 o'clock, and I wasn't alone. When they arrived, all three of them, they found me in my living room. I was sitting on the sofa, a cup of tea on the table. In the armchair opposite me, looking sharp in a perfectly tailored suit, was David Chen. "What is he doing here?" Robert spat, pointing at David. "This is a family matter." "Good evening, Robert," David said, his voice smooth as silk. "I'm here as Claire's counsel. She's asked me to observe and to clarify any legal points you might find confusing." "We're not confused," Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking. "We're victims, she's stealing from us." "On the contrary, Ms. Vance," David said, not even glancing at his notes. "Your niece has just resigned from a 15-year, unpaid position. She's not stealing from you, she simply stopped gifting you her services. There's a significant legal difference." My father, Robert, looked at me. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading, manipulative sorrow. This was his last card to play, the disappointed father. "Claire," he said, his voice breaking. "Your mother, she would be so ashamed of you, tearing your family apart. Over what? A little misunderstanding? We were worried. We were scared. That's why we said those things. We were just trying to snap you out of it." It was a masterful performance. The lies were so practiced, so smooth. A month ago, they would have worked. A month ago, I would have been crushed by the weight of the guilt. But I wasn't the woman from a month ago. "You weren't worried, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through his act. "You were annoyed. You weren't scared. You were inconvenienced, and I wasn't snapping out of it. I was being put on a stretcher." I stood up and walked to my desk. "You came here because you think you can fix this. You think you can yell, or cry, or guilt-trip me into going back to the way things were." I picked up a single sheet of paper. "This," I said, "is the final, executed letter of resignation. David filed it this morning. My role as trustee is officially and irrevocably terminated. But I know you all. You don't respond to letters. You respond to consequences. So I asked my new friend, Mr. Henderson from Lockwood, to do me a small favor." I looked at Brenda. "Aunt Brenda, your rent-free life is over. Mr. Henderson has already had the property appraised. You have two options. Start paying $4,200 a month, starting the 1st of next month, or you can be out in 30 days. He's also informed me that the trust will be countersuing you for 12 years of back rent if you decide to make a fuss." Brenda's face went white. She literally stumbled, grabbing the back of a chair. I turned to Leo. "Leo, my dear brother, I told Mr. Henderson about the little loan you've had from me for your mortgage for the last 5 years. He was very interested. He informed me that he'll be passing that information on to your father's new budget manager. I'm sure that will be an interesting conversation. I've also, by the way, informed the bank that I am removing myself as co-signer. You'll need to refinance. Good luck with your credit score." Leo just shook his head, looking at the floor. And then I turned to my father. And you, Dad, you wanted to know about your portfolio. Well, Mr. Henderson did his audit. He found irregularities. He found years of you borrowing from the principal to fund Leo's, Ventures, and Brenda's emergencies. He's concluded that the trust has been grossly mismanaged. Not by me. Invoice proves I did the work. But by you, by your demands, so he's locking it down. From now on, you are on an allowance. An allowance. The word came out as a strangled whisper. Yes, a monthly stipend. Enough to cover your property taxes, your utilities, and a very modest food budget. Just like the one you've had me on my entire life, one where all my earnings went straight back into the family. Your golf club membership? Denied. Your annual trip to Florida? Denied. Every luxury you have taken for granted, every dollar you spent as if you earned it, is gone. Until, and I quote, the trust's principal is restored to a healthy, sustainable level. The room was utterly, devastatingly silent. This was the public showdown. This was the moment where I laid it all out. You can't, Robert whispered. That's my money. It's the trust's money, David corrected him gently. And Claire was the only one protecting it. Now professionals are, and they, unlike Claire, have no emotional attachment to you whatsoever. They are, as she said, stabilizing the assets. You, he said, gesturing to the three of them, are the liabilities. That was the final blow, the moment of realization. Robert looked at me, his eyes full of a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. He knew he was beaten. Brenda was openly sobbing, not for the family, but for the bungalow. And Leo finally looked up. He looked at me, at the wreckage of his father and aunt, and he made, for the first time in his life, a decisive action. He walked past his father, he walked past his sobbing aunt. He came to me, stood in front of me, and said, his voice thick, I am so sorry, Claire, I am so sorry, you were right, I was a coward. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. My father saw it as the ultimate betrayal. Leo, he roared, get away from her. Leo flinched, but he held his ground. No, Dad, she's right, we did this. He turned and walked out of my apartment, not looking back. My father and aunt were left alone, two statues in the wreckage of their own creation. Robert's face was a mask of defeat. Brenda was a crumpled, sobbing mess. David, I said, I think we're done here. The downfall of Robert and Brenda was not a sudden, cinematic explosion. It was, fittingly, a slow, bureaucratic, and deeply humiliating grind. Lockwood Fiduciary Services was everything David had promised, a dispassionate, efficient machine of consequences. My invoice for $450,000 was the first item they processed. It was paid out of the trust's liquid assets, a move that Mr. Henderson called clearing a significant, past-due liability. This, combined with Lockwood's own substantial management fees, took an immediate and massive bite out of Robert's net worth. His allowance was even smaller than I had anticipated. He tried to fight it. He hired a lawyer, a cheap, aggressive one I recognized from daytime television ads. They filed a motion to have me declared an abusive trustee. David and Lockwood's legal team shut it down in a single hearing. The judge, after reviewing my 112-page invoice and my cardiologist's sworn affidavit, reportedly told my father's lawyer that he was lucky he wasn't being sued for harassment. My father's golf club membership was revoked for non-payment. His luxury car was repossessed, and Lockwood replaced it with a fiscally responsible used sedan. He was forced to sell the oversized family home I grew up in, as the trust could no longer afford the taxes and upkeep. He now lives in a modest, trust-owned condo. He is, for the first time in his life, solvent and miserable. Brenda's fate was, in many ways, more pathetic. She could not, or would not, pay the rent on the bungalow. She tried to consult on lifestyles and taste, but her vague, entitled charm didn't translate into actual income. She was formally evicted, after she was found to have damaged the property on her way out, a petty, final act of spite. Lockwood successfully sued her, placing a lien on any future inheritance she might have hoped for. The last I heard, she was living with a long-lost cousin, paying for her keep by, ironically, being a nanny and a housekeeper. Leo was the wild card. He had, in that final moment, chosen a side. It was a shaky, terrified choice, but it was a choice. He did, in fact, lose his condo. The bank would not refinance to a high-risk, low-income borrower without a cosigner. He lost his car. He hit, by all accounts, rock bottom. He called me about 6 months after the showdown. He was working a real job, he said, as a barista. He was living in a tiny, one-room apartment above a pizza place. He sounded different, tired but real. I wanted to say thank you, he said. For what, Leo? For ruining your life? No, he said, and I heard him take a shaky breath. For showing me what it was. My life, it wasn't real, it was just Dad's scraps filtered through you. I'm actually paying my own bills, Claire, for the first time. It's hard, but it's mine. We met for coffee. It was awkward. He was no longer the golden boy. He was just a man, finally paying his own way. We're not close. We may never be, but we're honest. He's slowly paying me back for the mortgage payments I covered. It's $50 a month. It will take him the rest of his life, but he's never missed a payment. As for me, I healed. The SVT, as Dr. Aris predicted, became a non-issue once the source of my stress was eliminated. With the $450,000, the money I had earned, finally, I took a year off. I traveled. I read. I slept. I learned who I was when I wasn't being a financial analyst or a trustee or a pillar or a scapegoat.